Ted Bundy was born on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont, USA. His birth name was Theodore Robert Cowell. Bundy's mother, Eleanor Louise Cowell, was unmarried at the time of his birth, and the identity of his father remains uncertain. Bundy grew up with his mother and her parents in Philadelphia, initially living with his grandparents under the belief that his mother was his sister and his grandparents were his parents. This confusion in his early family life would later be cited as a source of emotional distress. Ted Bundy's early life was not marked by any obvious signs of violent behavior, and for a time, he was described as a relatively well-behaved child. He was a good student and had a friendly personality, although he struggled with his identity and the complexities of his family background. Growing up, Bundy reportedly had a difficult relationship with his mother and was disturbed by the knowledge that she was not his biological mother. This early sense of abandonment and confusion may have contributed to the development of his later psychopathic tendencies. Bundy's childhood was marked by feelings of social isolation, and he began to exhibit signs of violent behavior as he entered his teenage years. As a young boy, Bundy was reportedly cruel to animals, a hallmark behavior often associated with future serial killers. He began to fantasize about violence, particularly sexual violence, and by his teenage years, these fantasies had taken on a more disturbing nature. His early years were also filled with feelings of inadequacy, as he had trouble with relationships, particularly with women. This difficulty would later evolve into his obsession with harming them. In the late 1960s, Bundy enrolled at the University of Washington, where he studied psychology. Despite his academic success, he struggled with personal relationships, particularly with women. He had several short-lived relationships, but it was during this time that Bundy began to develop the manipulative and deceptive traits that would later make him so dangerous. He was described as charming, intelligent, and good-looking, traits that helped him manipulate and gain the trust of his victims. It was in the early 1970s that Bundy began his violent rampage. His first confirmed murder occurred in 1974, although it is believed that he may have started his killing spree even earlier. Bundy targeted young women, often those who were attractive, and used his charm to lure them into vulnerable situations. His modus operandi involved abducting his victims, often after offering help, such as pretending to be injured or in distress, before assaulting and killing them. He would then dispose of their bodies, often returning later to perform further mutilations. His killings were methodical and cruel, often involving strangulation, sexual assault, and the dismemberment of his victims. Bundy was also known for keeping trophies, such as body parts, from his victims as keepsakes, a behavior that demonstrated his psychological detachment and sadistic tendencies. Despite the brutal nature of his crimes, Bundy was able to evade capture for several years due to his ability to blend in and appear harmless. Ted Bundy's killing spree continued across several states, including Washington, Utah, and Colorado. In 1975, he was arrested for the kidnapping and assault of a woman in Utah. At the time, Bundy was considered a suspect in several murders, but it wasn't until he was caught during a routine traffic stop that the authorities were able to make an arrest. Bundy's ability to evade capture for so long was partly due to his intelligence and ability to manipulate the police. He was able to escape from custody twice, further heightening his notoriety. In 1977, Bundy was tried for the murders of several young women in Florida, including 2 women he had killed at a sorority house at Florida State University. During his trial, Bundy insisted on representing himself, a decision that gave him the opportunity to manipulate the courtroom and further exhibit his manipulative and narcissistic behavior. His trial was a media sensation, and Bundy became infamous for his calm demeanor and his refusal to take responsibility for his crimes. Ted Bundy's trial concluded with a conviction for the murders of 2 young women in Florida, and he was sentenced to death. He continued to maintain his innocence throughout the proceedings, even as more evidence linked him to the murders. Bundy's behavior in prison was erratic, and he began to confess to other murders, ultimately admitting to the murders of at least 30 women across several states, although the true number is believed to be much higher. Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair on January 24, 1989, at Florida State Prison. His execution marked the end of one of the most notorious killing sprees in American history. Bundy's life and crimes have been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and films, and he remains one of the most infamous serial killers in history. Ted Bundy's life has been studied extensively by criminal psychologists due to the chilling nature of his crimes. Bundy was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, and his behavior exhibited many of the traits of a psychopath, including a lack of empathy, manipulativeness, and an overwhelming need for control. His ability to appear normal and even charming in social settings made him an unusually dangerous killer, as it allowed him to easily gain the trust of his victims. Bundy's crimes also raised questions about the nature of evil and the psychology of serial killers. His ability to present himself as a friendly, well-educated, and charismatic man made him difficult to suspect, and it wasn't until his crimes escalated that authorities began to seriously investigate him. Bundy's case has been studied by law enforcement agencies and criminologists around the world as an example of how a seemingly normal individual can harbor dark and violent tendencies. Ted Bundy's legacy continues to influence both popular culture and criminal psychology, and his name is forever linked with the darkness of serial murder. His story is a haunting reminder of the capacity for evil that can lie hidden behind a charming facade.